called Turning Lemons into Lemonades, Best Practices During the Pandemic. My name is Bob Keipel, and I want to recognize the president of CXFM, Dr. Tom DeWitt.
Hi, thanks for joining us today on this road we're traveling. We're excited to host this webinar and our three esteemed guests who are going to provide perspectives on customer experience in the time of COVID and how they're adapting both online and offline. I want to start things out here with a little poll for you to get some perspective on where your organization is right now in terms of COVID. So some of you may have participated in a poll like this before, so I'm just gonna share my screen and I'm using Poll Everywhere. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go to this URL in your browser. So it's pollev.com and then /TomDeWitt982. And to benefit you, I'm going to go ahead and type that into the chat as well in case you're having a problem getting it. If I can get into the chat.
You can also do it on your phone. You see the instructions there for texting.
Yep, you can do it on your phone too. So let's see, pollev.com and then /TomDeWitt982. There you go. And so what we'd like you to do there is just comment on what's the single most critical customer experience issue your organization is facing as a result of COVID. And as you enter your responses, they're gonna show up here.
They're all set. They don't have any problems.
I guess everything's going
good. It's looking good.
Let's make sure it's activated. No, yeah, it's activated. Yep. Or maybe they just have long answers.
That's true.
There. Okay. Staying healthy. The ability to conduct group interviews with users and customers.
That's interesting. I bet it's hard to get people to show up for stuff.
Hand off to other team members. We'll give it another minute here in case anybody else wants to chime in. Wow. Varying level of concern about customers about physical distancing and sanitary. Yeah. Interesting. Keeping team morale.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, that personal interaction. Oh, access technology. Good point.
Yeah, not everybody has a fancy computer or whatever, right?
Yep. Or
hey, just work from home. Oh, well, with what?
Yeah. Well, this is a great start to the program. All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so. Those are all really relevant things, I think, even as it relates to, even this about not just customers, but also your employees that come into contact with customers every day. And I imagine the conflicts that they have with customers that don't want to wear masks or don't want to social distance. Misinformation. Okay, good.
Sure.
This is a great start. And I think I've positioned you well now, Bob, to start off the program. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'll let you go ahead and introduce our guest and kick off the program.
Sounds good. I have gotten a couple of emails. I don't know how many people we have on, but a couple of people have said they've had trouble getting in. One person said the access code didn't work. So if it's possible, maybe Mary Beth, you could reblast the link to everybody.
Absolutely. Yep. I'm just
Yeah.
looking at it. Okay. Will
Great.
do.
But I will get started. Thanks, Tom, and thanks everybody for attending. So this webinar is right in line with CX of M's mission, which is to collaborate and advance the practice and application of CX by sharing best practices. As awful as this pandemic has been, we've been seeing great creativity coming out of the customer experience discipline. And today we've got a super mix of people and companies we can learn from. I want to note that we have other free activities and events that you can tap into. I just want to advertise a little bit for cxofm.org. You'll see that we have a blog page and other free activities and events we have our CXOM radio network, which is a collection of podcasts. Right now we have 4 shows and new episodes are constantly being added. One's called Stay Curious with Dave Fish. We have the Tom and Bob Show starring Tom and I. Press 1 for Nick, The World of CX with Darren Hood. And we're excited to have a number of new podcasts in development, which should be popping out really soon. And then, if that's not enough, we have an upcoming online and free symposium on October 29th. This will be an amazing event because it's going to be hosted, for one thing, we've got great speakers and content. I'm not going to spoil that right now, but we've got a cool platform called Whova, which allows you to view presentations, participate in live Q&A sessions, and do networking during coffee and meal breaks. So, Tom, do you want to add anything about this?
Just to clarify, that event is not being hosted by CX of M. It's being hosted by CXM at MSU. Although the program does feature award-winning best practices and customer experience management that were awarded by CX of M. So I'm going to share the URL for the symposium in the chat area. Maybe during the breaks you can take a look at it, and please click through to registration. I know we already, within 2 days, we already have 100 people registered. Expecting up to 1,000 or more globally to be registered by the day of the program.
And we've had a couple of these so far, 2 of them, and they are fantastic. You love the people. It's so interesting. You get inspired about what you can take back to your organization. So highly recommend this. So now some final housekeeping. I know everybody's familiar with Zoom. Just remember you can use the chat feature. I believe due to the size of the group, we're going to start out with people muted. So you can go to the chat if you want to sort of raise an issue or a question during the presentations. So here's how it's going to flow. We have 3 dynamic and accomplished, interesting guys with us today. Brad Kruger from Advocate Aurora Health, which covers Illinois and Wisconsin. Brad's the Senior Assistant Vice President, Patient Experience and Global Executive Health. We have Ashok Kumar, who is the owner of Title Boxing Club. Actually, he owns 3 clubs in Farmington Hills, Troy, and Birmingham, Michigan. And we've got Vivek Saran, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Bell Tire. Each gentleman will give a presentation, and then after each one, we'll open it up to Q&A. So please feel free to fire away with questions in the chat function during the presentation, but know that we'll open it up after each presentation is completed. So Brad Kruger is going to go first. And welcome, Brad. If you would, as a way of getting started, please talk a little bit about your company and your role.
Bob and Tom, thank you for having me here today and to help explain some of our journey. Call it a journey because the first week in March of this year, our lives turned upside down when COVID started to COVID-19 started to have an effect on patients, and then from a healthcare perspective, starting to come into the emergency rooms and our hospitals. What I thought I'd do, I'm not sure if everyone can see the screen. Okay, just go over a quick, just some quick background on our organization. I think it's important just to understand the scope and then talk through then how, from a system standpoint, we can set the the consumer experience to be flexible enough to take into account the different impact that COVID-19 has across different geographies. So I thought those questions at the beginning were perfect. And again, we experienced prior and experiencing right now the impact of social distancing, unmasking, technology across the organization. And hopefully I'll be able to share some stories, some funny, maybe some not so funny, but accurate, on people's impact, patients and visitors to the changes that COVID-19 has had on healthcare. So let me go a little bit about the background of the organization. I think it's important to frame it with the values and the purpose statement, because that helps guide our decision making. And it guided it in the beginning of the pandemic, and as things evolve, as we learn more about COVID-19, it continues to help shape our approach as we learn more about the virus, about how it spreads, and about how to prevent it in our healthcare institutions. So our purpose, we help people live well, and the values of excellence, that we are a top performer in everything that we do, compassion, and respect. So I'll touch on these more in detail as we get down into the presentation, and I start to share some examples of the impact of COVID-19 on healthcare and the impact that it's had on us. So again, a little bit about Advocate Aurora Health. It spans across 2 states, Wisconsin and Illinois, 28 hospitals, 74,000 employees. So inside the organization, we call them team members, but 74,000 employees, 8,300 physicians, and 10,000 volunteers as well. So you can see that's a lot of people. How do we change operations to prevent transmission opportunities of the virus with that many people? We see a total of 3 million unique patients, I think. That's important across the geography. So the geography spreads from northern Wisconsin, like to joke, close to Canada, all the way down to South Chicago. So as we think through, the impact of COVID-19, those are very distinct geographies, large urban hospitals and small rural hospitals. So the communities in which those hospitals serve see the pandemic and see the preventive measures very differently, and rightfully so, because the spread has been historically different based on geography. So I like to joke, if you're in northern Wisconsin, you don't think too much about Chicago, perhaps two times a year when the Packers played the Bears. Chicago is a different world than northern Wisconsin is. So what does that mean? That means that how to create a consistent process, a consistent policy to support the brand across very distinct geographies that are having a different impact, or are feeling the experiences of COVID-19 very differently. So again, that consistent brand, how do we do that across a broad geography that's being impacted differently by COVID-19? So one thing about our framework I think it's important to touch on is the voice of the customer in healthcare. I used a lesson learned in working with Tom. I moved away from Michigan blue to Michigan State green. So I now know the Pantene color level of Michigan State. So I wanted to point that out. Tom, I heard what you said, and I changed accordingly. So a little bit about our organization. We're very much, if you were to say, consumer-centric right now. And as we look out ahead, how do we move from consumer-based to relationship-based on an individual and patient family level? And how do we incorporate very customizable components of people's journey? So for example, how do we incorporate the zip code in which a patient lives into their care plan to help them live well? So I say zip code because I'm not sure if too many people know this, but the number one variable in your health outcomes is where you live. So why we like to talk about genetics and lifestyle choices, it's your zip code is actually the number one variable. And now, as we look out ahead, how do we continue to drive a loyalty? So we have performance metrics driving a loyalty, and then the feedback coming real time. I think historically we use a lot of surveys, paper-based surveys through CMS, Medicare, Medicaid. Now moving to more real time, and then our voice of our and the VOC platforms. So how do we then move into an integrated feedback ecosystem that measures across the experience from the call center to the care itself to the billing? And I point this out because whatever our plans had, the first week of March, they got turned upside down. I mean, COVID-19 had such an immense impact on healthcare. I think we saw it a lot in the news, especially from, I would say, New York, the larger cities on the East Coast, as well as Los Angeles, San Francisco on the West Coast, and that has cascaded across now all hospitals in the nation. So I put in bold a couple key things I'd like to touch on today, because I'm not sure that people really understand just how much it's changed. So historically, we had communication pathways. So we know that communication with patients, communication with their families by the nurses, the care team, the physicians is a key to ensuring an excellent experience. And when I say excellent experience, not just from the consumer standpoint, but also from a safety standpoint and a quality standpoint. So all those interventions that we had when COVID-19 hit were immediately cut off. So it's almost like you took a nerve and sliced it in half. So we had to regrow that quickly to reconnect those communication pathways. So for example, we had to, with our visitation, had to significantly reduce or eliminate a visitation. So now that feedback that we used to get with the patient, their families, and the provider stopped. So how can we rebuild that quickly? So we used a virtual platform, moved into a Zoom space, did a lot of Zoom meetings between the patient, the doctor, their family, telephonically. So I'll share a little bit about what that means too. So there's the care itself, and then there's end of life care. So, historically, end of life, you could have your family and friends around you during those last stages while you're still in the hospital. That stopped with COVID-19. So now all of a sudden, there's this huge sense of a loss. There's no closure for family members, knowing that their loved one is in a hospital bed by themselves, passing away. So to reestablish that, what we did was create a virtual platform using Zoom and extended out to family and loved ones virtual keys, and kept open then 24 hour a day space, then that the patients in the virtual room through the use of a tablet, and their families and loved ones from anywhere in the world can be in that virtual room with them at their time of passing. So I'd like to share a story about what that did mean. We've got a notice. We have a very, very engaged social media platform that can operate and get to the bedside exceptionally quick. So a granddaughter of a patient who was passing away went to Twitter, contacted us through Twitter about her grandmother, asked if she could log in to see her. So within 90 minutes, we were able to coordinate and extend the virtual keys to a room that the grandmother, who was originally from South Korea, her granddaughter in Chicago, another granddaughter in Los Angeles, and then family members in South Korea could log in, sing hymns and prayers, and be with her at her time of death. Now that's something we never had before. We never had that virtual support like that before. So as we turn lemons into lemonade. That was one of the ahas for me. It was the why. Why didn't, from a consumer standpoint, respect standpoint, compassion standpoint, we have this virtual model. I'll speak a little bit about another virtual one. A patient who was in a Chicago hospital, 91 years old. He had COVID-19. He was positive, declining quickly in the ICU. He wasn't eating. He was all set to pass. Through the virtual connections, we were able to connect with his daughter here in the States, as well as his daughter in Ukraine. So now the patient was originally Ukrainian, came here, his daughter then went back. So what she did, it was fascinating. So every night at dinner time, when it was time to eat, opened up the virtual room, his daughter in Ukraine would log in and eat with him. So what happened was the prognosis suddenly improved. 2.5 weeks later, 91 years old, COVID-19 positive, was discharged from the hospital. So I thought that was a great way too, that virtual platform to connect people anywhere in the world to help improve care. Another thing, I think it was mentioned here in the questions, was the employees and the psychological impact COVID-19 has had. Of course, in healthcare, we saw from the news it's having an exponential impact on employees, both from a PTSD level, having to deal with the amount of challenges that are associated with it, not being able to help at times, the uncertainty of the virus. And also then too, there's a big pressure around safety. So what does safety look like in COVID-19? And does everybody understand this? What I mean by everybody, not the employees, but the consumers. So I'll skip down to the public perceptions of safety measures around masking, social distancing, screening. So a little bit about my role changed a lot from a consumer experience standpoint. I oversee all the screening tables and process and the guidelines across the organization. So we screen roughly 125, 130,000 people a week. Take temperatures, go through the safety questions, the screening questions, ensure a safe environment. And the behaviors from our guests are at two ends. You know, it goes across the spectrum. You have one group of people who look around and see other visitors there and think, this isn't safe. We need to have us should be having a lot less people at the hospital. So there's that end of the spectrum. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where people say, I don't want to wear a mask. You can't make me wear a mask. Throw their water bottle at an employee and storm out. So there's a very high emotion tied to this and the amount of training that it's taken with our employees on how to deal with that situation. Now, fortunately, many of our hospitals have security there. So there's an escalation process that we can utilize if we need to. I just want to say that that there's a spectrum of behaviors when people are asked to mask, to social distance, and then how to help our team deal with that has been a challenge. And just one more thing too, just so people understand the impact. Where patients go on a hospital was significantly changed with COVID-19. You can no longer say, oh, this is a cardiac patient, we're going to move into a cardiac floor. What you need to know first is that cardiac patient COVID-19 positive? Because if you were to accidentally place a patient who is COVID-19 positive, asymptomatic, meaning that they don't show signs and symptoms, but yet they're positive. If you were to move them with other cardiac patients and not follow proper safety procedures, i.e., until act like that patient's positive, you could inadvertently create a transmission and a spread to other employees or to other patients on the floor. So it changed the whole flow and path of how patients move through a hospital. And then that just cascades out. So your lab technician that used to see cardiac patients on this floor now has to see cardiac patients on multiple floors. So what type of personal protection equipment or PPE that you have to wear very different. If a patient has tested COVID negative, tested COVID positive, and then there's this in-between state. Internally, our language, I know healthcare uses a lot of acronyms. This is PUI, persons under investigation, meaning signs and symptoms, they're being tested, test isn't back yet. So that PUI category is key because you have to act like they're positive. So then all the stuff that happens from a safety standpoint, until you know for sure, or until that test comes back. So again, it's changed our world significantly. And what we're finding out oftentimes from a safety perspective, it's for the better. I think I just want to share one quick story and then I know my time's up. It's from Australia. So Australia this year, as you know, opposite seasons than the US. So their flu season is winding down now. They had a very, very light flu season. You know, it's reading about it was interesting. And one of the statements was, you know, that social distancing, staying greater than 6 feet away and avoiding large inside events and masking, those same steps that prevent transmission of COVID-19. Oh, I forgot one too, hand washing. Make sure you wash your hands all the time. Very, very important. So the social distancing, the hand washing, the masking, those very things that that prevent the transmission of COVID-19 also prevent the transmission of flu and other viruses, other coronaviruses like the cold. So you can start to see that those very same safety measures for COVID-19 are very important for stopping the spread of flu and other viral diseases. So will everything go away? And probably not, nor you can say should it. So it's very important, I think, as we look at ways to stop not just the spread of COVID-19, but other viruses. I'll use the flu, that masking, the social distancing, washing of your hands is exceptionally important. And then the technology and those core safety measures that have got escalated within the pandemic. So to reference the cartoon here, from the lemons and then Starbucks, a lemonade, that those core things can reshape our businesses in the future and make them stronger.
Excellent. Thanks, Brad. I want to remind everybody that you can enter questions or comments into the chat section, and so please do. And just as a way of getting things started in the Q&A after Brad, I want to ask a question or two here. We've heard that people are shifting or avoiding doing things in hospitals, like putting off surgeries and avoiding other procedures and things like that. How has that changed the business for you? Because I've heard in some cases, hospitals are losing money and more financial stress than they used to be. And so how's that affected your system?
I think that's an excellent question. So in the in the surge, so as heading up into the peak, the first wave, we closed a lot of our outpatient centers and elective surgeries. So not knowing, we go back in time to March, April, May, there wasn't the awareness of exactly how this spreads. We needed to build the internal safety controls. So from a safe perspective, close that. So that significantly impacted our revenue stream. Since that time, we're actually performing above expectations from a financial standpoint. We're doing, so we have what's called a Safe Care Promise. So it's our promise to our patients and their families about how we're going to take care of them in the pandemic. That's from masking, from enforcing social distancing, also testing. So for example, pre-procedure, an elective pre-procedure test gets a COVID-19 test. So 3 days prior, you have to go in, have your nose swabbed. And then if you're negative, and then you get to move on to the next step for pre-procedure. So building in those safety controls.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot too regarding airflow, making sure that the airflow meets the enhanced OSHA standards in the procedural room. So they have how much air in a room, how long does it take for the air to get recycled X amount of times. So doing all airflow checks on every single procedure room, measuring that, and then setting your schedule accordingly. So at first, we took, as an organization, took a very large hit financially, and now with our Safe Care Promise and those key safety steps in place, the trust is there now with our patients and the community, and then also then people are feeling more comfortable. Their anxiety is going down, and their willingness to come in is going up. And I just want to share something too. This is a good example of why, if you aren't getting a checkup now, you probably should get a checkup. We had somebody who was having a small pain in their abdomen come into the emergency room. Come to find out it was an infected gallbladder, had to have the surgery emergently. And then there was a spread of the bacteria, then had to go up into the ICU for 3 to 4 days. There's this big, huge inpatient process for something that pre-pandemic, the patient said that he would have come in when he was starting to feel the pain come into the emergency room. Because of the pandemic, he did not.
Mm-hmm.
So that was delayed. So his gallbladder was probably leaking for about a month. So that turned into an infection, and that, then that turned into what was an outpatient surgery, moved it into an inpatient surgery, and then an inpatient stay in the ICU, which led to a longer length of stay. So you can start to see now different care pathways that are happening because people are putting off their preventive care, and those tiny things that people would have gone in for in the past, they're choosing not to go.
Mm-hmm. So a little PSA for everybody here on the webinar.
Yes,
know,
so very important.
Don't let it go. Yeah. A couple questions have come in here, Brad. One is about with the employees that are working in the hospitals and the medical locations. Can you talk a little bit more detail about how you're preparing the employees to deal with those negative confrontations that you alluded to?
So we have an internal training process. So our security team has been amazing. Actually, if there's ever an acting gig, I think that they should put in their resume. So they created a video training. So we have the online training process. There's a curriculum. They take it online, and then embedded in that are scenarios acted out by the security team. And I have to say that those scenarios, actually some of them have come true, too, especially with the masking. Social distancing, I think it's more personal, and there can be a talk off, but the masking seems to be a push point. I don't know if it is for other people on the call and listening. I'm looking forward to the presentations here too to find out. But I know in healthcare, masking is a big thing, which from a healthcare standpoint is kind of funny because surgeons always had the mask, they always wash their hands. We like to joke that I don't think anybody would want to go in for a procedure and have their surgeon leaning over them with their chest open, not wearing a mask and not having washed their hands. So internally, that was just something that we always do for safety. And now it's being extended to the public. And I think it's new for them as well. And some of those discussions have gotten a little bit emotional.
Right. I have another question for you. It's kind of a combination question. We're all about sharing best practices, and I'm just curious, you had that really great couple stories about end of life, which were just really beautiful. And it occurred to me that they didn't necessarily apply to COVID-19 because a lot of people have relatives all around the world that can't get there. So which best practices or changes that have happened feel temporary and which ones are permanent? And then as a part of that same question, how are you sharing best practices and receiving best practices from other hospital systems so that everybody can get better?
Excellent question. So the first part of that, which ones will stick? I think the technology will stick. Heading into the year, internally we have goals for visits. For virtual visits, our annual target for 2020 was 25,000 virtual visits. So that was set in Q4 of 2019, and looked out ahead and thought, okay, virtually, we want to get into the virtual visit space more. We're going to set a target of 25,000 virtual visits.
Mhm.
As of last week, we had 800,000 virtual visits.
Mhm.
So how to provide care in a virtual space? That's what that frontier is going to be. And how do doctors get trained on how to diagnose and treat? A lot of that, I mean, it has been in person. Now we're taking that in-person context, that interaction, and moving it into a virtual space. How do doctors diagnose and then treat in a virtual space? So those clinical algorithms and pathways that all the doctors have inside their head and use have to be tweaked a bit in a virtual space. So that will, my guess is that will continue to grow and expand that virtual treatment, and more care in the home, less care on site and in person.
Yep.
So some of those best practices, I would say that would stick. So there's the virtual, there's the hand washing that will continue. I would say even masking to some extent, especially heading into when after COVID-19, no matter what happens there, it's probably something we should have done with the flu season as well. How to prevent transmission of flu. Same thing, masking, hand washing, social distancing. So some version of that, my guess, is going to stay as well. And then how do we share? There's multiple consortiums that we as healthcare systems have. Some of it is just through the consumer experience, and our experienced partners have large consortiums, weekly calls that each system shares what they're working on. Then there's virtual sharing as well. So we have different ones from the hospital association. So we have the American Hospital Association is one, and that gets filtered at a state level. So we have those groups. So there's a lot of co-sharing in this. It's moving, if you want to say, just to support the theme of this podcast too, turning lemons into lemonade. Healthcare has really gotten collaborative really quick. Historically, it was a little bit of, especially the more local you get, the more competitive it was, with healthcare systems competing against one another for patients. What I've seen with the pandemic, it shifted quickly to a collaboration model. So how do we collaborate? And that safe patient care is the goal versus, if you will, market share or something like that. And then how do we differentiate ourselves on our safety experience? And then how do we then share those bright spots with our partners, instead of looking at it like it's a competitive situation?
Yep. Great. Thank you. And thank you, Brad. Great presentation. We really appreciate it. And we're going to shift gears big time. We're going to welcome Ashok Kumar, who owns some boxing gyms. And so, yeah, I'm sure he sends you a few customers every once in a while. Ashok, if you could start us off, just talk about your company and your role, and then we'll get into it. Thanks again, Brad.
I can share my screen briefly over here. One quick second. All right, here we go. Can you see my screen? Okay. Well, thank you, Bob and Tom, for this opportunity here. Very happy to be here and to be put to this elite panel. And Brad, that was very informative. I know the healthcare industry has been impacted big time. My wife's, my brother-in-law, they own a little hospital nursing home in India. So they've had to make big changes. I have a neighbor that I'm really close to that is a surgeon in Providence Hospital. So he tells me things, but very informative, good to know for all of us. Healthcare is so important. So yeah, completely switching gears to, the boxing fitness world. And it's interesting you said, Bob, members, because one of our members, Darren Hood, is the one that made the introduction. And I'm like absolutely happy to help anything I can do to help with improving customer experience for everyone would be great. So what is interesting is Title Boxing Club, it's a workout, but it's an experience-based workout, right? It's all about from when you walk in through the doors to the trainers on the heavy bags, to the front desk, to how clean the place is. People think the boxing club, there's sweat and blood everywhere, but it's non-contact, right? The whole goal is experience. You won't even find dust anywhere in the club. That's kind of how we maintain it.
Hey, Ashok, could you go on presentation mode so we can
Oh,
see
shoot, yes.
how, yeah, sorry.
There you go. I've been out of the corporate world for a bit, so I'm on boxing clubs now.
Actually, it made it different. It made it, I think that's the wrong mode.
Hang on 1 second. Nope. I don't know what it's doing.
I'm not,
If you go to display settings on the previous slide, I think it'll solve it for you.
Display settings over here.
Go to, yeah. Go to presentation. There you go. And then up here, you see display settings at the top, and then just duplicate slideshow.
Is that better? Thank you, Vivek. So Title Boxing Club is completely experience-based. Our goal is for us to deliver an experience that our members will remember. The workouts are amazing. The sport itself has been forever. So it was very interesting. It's been an interesting transition for us. It is a workout, so we were used to members being close to us. It's training, so trainers being close to our members. It's kind of changed how we do things, tremendously. So step back, Title Boxing, the brand has been around forever, about 40, 50 years. The retail merchandising side of it, that is. The fitness boxing club side of it started about 12, 13 years ago, 180 franchises nationwide. We own 3 locations, like Bob mentioned, here in Michigan. That's us in a nutshell. We, my background is in engineering. I was in IT for about 19 years. The last 3 years of me being in the corporate world is when we decided to enter the whole franchising world, my wife and I, and we signed up for Title Boxing Club. 8th year in business, we opened our first club in 2013 in Farmington Hills. It's been nice. It's been a really fun ride. We've received awards every single year we've been in business. We were picked best in country by Title a couple of years ago. And it's kind of changed our lives around quite a bit. And again, going back to the experience, for me, the vibe and experience is what I'll always cherish. We are business owners. I don't know when, some point down the line we'll move on, but I'll always remember the relationships that I've built here at Title. Even Darren, right? Darren Hood, I know exactly who he is, what he does. It's just who we are. That's how we built. So that's us. The workout itself is, the workouts are led by professional fighters, but members are coming to get fit, not get hit, we say. So what's interesting is, even before COVID, this was almost a no-touch experience, because you're coming in, you're wearing your hand wraps, putting on your own boxing gloves, and you're on your own bag. And at the end of the workout, you wipe everything down yourself, and when you leave, we wipe it down again. So in some sense, we were kind of ready for COVID, but man, who expected this, right? So that's us in a nutshell. That's our clubs in a nutshell. And going back to COVID itself, I remember it was 16th of March. I remember very clearly. I was actually at our Birmingham location, our newest location, with my 12-year-old daughter and my nephew that was visiting from Texas. And we were actually doing a class with a trainer. And in the middle of class, the announcement came out. So we finished class, we heard about it. We had to pack up, close down, and call my managers at the other locations, shut everything down and go home. It was a huge hit, I'm not gonna lie. Title Box Club Corporate, it's a franchisor, right? They provided some good support, and they right away provided some online workout options. And we had the option of continuing to build our member base by providing online workouts, but we took a stance and said, we're gonna freeze everything. We're not gonna bill our members, but we still decided to provide those online workouts on our dime. And my goal with this, when we decided to do that, was to kind of build a trust with the member base. And I wanted to make sure that people understood who we are. Again, these are members. We don't call them customers. We don't call them clients. That are members. They're family. And I wanted to grow, extend that trust and the confidence that we're there. We're going to take care of them. And I think that went a long way in helping us come back, right? What was interesting is when we switched to these online workouts, we were only doing, I think we started off with a couple of weeks. And then we had members call our clubs and say, hey, just give us 1 or 2 workouts a day and continue billing us. So that was an amazing, amazing thing. It goes to the whole family environment I talked about. So all 3 clubs combined, we had about 100 members that opted to remain billed just in return for some online workouts. So we launched that right away. Technology was not quite there yet, so we went on Facebook Live, launched it. And through the pandemic, through our nearly 4 months of shutdown, those members kind of helped us quite a bit, support our trainers too through this. It went a long way. And then what happened was in late June, when our region entered phase 4, we had a decision to make, because they opened up some athletic training facilities, but gyms remained closed. So we were able to get the permissions to open up as an athletic training facility, because we don't have a lot of gym equipment. We have treadmills, we have 1 treadmill, 1 elliptical, and some weights. So we'll lock all that down. So actually, the police officers came and they checked everything out, everything was good. So we were able to open up in very limited capacity. And of course, when we entered into phase 5, we were able to open up a little bit more fully, right? The impact to a small business owner is big. The help from the government has helped, actually, kept us in business. But what really helped was, we had built a very strong foundation, a very strong base, and the relationships kept us going, right? We took a big impact. I think our overall, all 3 clubs combined, we took a 20% hit on revenues. And it got so bad when we opened, there was so much confusion out there, open, not open, financial distress, concerns with COVID, what are our protocols? So we got so many members calling in that we had to do the worst thing a business owner has to do, which is like pause all advertising, because we wanted to take care of our current member base. And we did that for 30 days, stepped back, and took care of them before we decided to move forward with advertising and growing our member base, right? Right now, some of the things that we were able to do, right? Making lemonade from lemons, right? One of the first things that happened when we shut down our clubs was, my wife and I, we've been doing this 8 years now, and life is so busy. We are owner operator, we have managers, but we're very much involved in our day-to-day activities. So life is so crazy busy. So all of a sudden, March 17th, 18th, we were going, oh my God, what are we going to do with all this time? So first thing we did is we were able to reconnect with family back in India. And, lemonade, a big lemonade is, I'll tell you, every single day now in the mornings, since the 17th of March, we get to talk to a family in India at breakfast. It's become a new normal. My 12-year-old comes down for breakfast. She wakes up early so she could talk to grandma in India. So that was a big win, actually. The second thing, of course, we sit back, we start looking at costs. So yes, of course, we looked at cutting costs and making some changes, but we were also able to reassess the business. We've been doing this 8 years, and there were things that we knew that had to be changed, and this gave us an opportunity to kind of make those changes, be it HR related, people related, technology related, which was needed, be it the kind of workouts we delivered. a lot of those changes, we were able to put some plans into place and start executing on them. And that has really helped when we opened back up. We were able to launch some of those programs, and that's taken off really well, right? Title Boxing Club Corporate, again, provided us a good framework of what we needed to do to get our clubs back, and we had to combine that with what the state of Michigan recommended or required us to do from a mandated protocol perspective. And we realized very early our staff needed to be trained. So even during the shutdown, we had our trainers on Zoom meetings talking about how they couldn't get too close to the members, how to lead a workout, while maintaining the social distancing, how to lead a workout with face shields on, how, a key part of our workout is core, where people actually lay on the floor. And we had to kind of start reducing that, and we had to start learning to do standing core exercises. So all those trainings were done. Training for our front desk staff on attending phone calls. A lot of questions about COVID, what was being done, how are we handling it? And we had to change everything around. We used to have 40 plus classes a week. We had to scale it down to about 25 to 30, depending on the location. And we had to have a good 45 minutes in between our classes to clean everything from the floors to the heavy bags to anything that was touched needed to be wiped down. Staff wearing shields all the time. We had to throw away, nothing can be loaned anymore, not boxing gloves, not core mats, everything had to be thrown away. Technology had to be set up where people are now can set themselves up to come in to the facility, or even to do classes. Everything is now online and app-based. So that was set up. A bunch of these changes. And then of course, we had to phase out things, right? We had to turn off the showers, the water fountains. Like I said, all the weights and the cardio machines had to be turned off. And we had to plan when these were all coming back active, right? So the training aspect was huge. That helped us get ready, prepare for it. And we kind of expected a bunch of phone calls to come. So we had even our Vonage lines ready to go, where it would ring multiple number and multiple locations. So somebody would always pick up the phone and answer those questions. And that went a long way in making sure that members' concerns were handled, right? And one thing that has always helped us, even when we shut down throughout the pandemic, we did our best to stay in touch with our members through emails, mass texts. Social media has been huge. And on live workouts, where we actually got to interact with the members that were watching the workouts. And that communication has been key. That has helped alleviate a lot of these concerns that that people have with COVID. What's interesting too is that I find, like, broadly there are two groups of people, right? One that there's very few that actually say, okay, this isn't happening. 90+% know it's real, it's happening. But one group of people are not really worried about it, and the other are like really concerned. There's not many that are kind of in between, which is really interesting. And we had to take know how to handle the whole group. Going back to handling customer concerns, masking, they have to come in with a mask. And initially, our staff struggled with it, and literally I said, hey, tell your members we can't be shut down. If they want to continue working out, they have to wear their mask coming in, and it worked.
Do they wear their mask during the workout? Sorry to interrupt you.
So they're allowed to take it off, health reasons, because it's you're 160 to 180 beats a minute working out. So you have to stay by a bag. If you're moving around, you have to mask up again. But as long as you buy a bag, we've taken down half the bags, so there's 6 feet between bags. So you're able to take it off. But as soon as the workout's done, if you're moving away from the bag, you got to mask up again, right? So yeah, so I mean, just telling the members that please don't let us shut down. We are a small business. I mean, we have people walk back to the cars, mask up, and come back in, right? So anyway, where we are as from a business perspective, we took a big hit, 20 to 25%, and then what was nice is that listening to a lot of these webinars and Zoom meetings and training sessions. Something that somebody said during the shutdown, I'll remember forever. It was, I think, on one of these fitness gym-related Zooms, and they said, remember that the restaurant industry did not kill the kitchen, right? So meaning, yes, you need a hybrid model. Yes, you need to launch live workouts, but the in-person workouts are not going away. So you got to remember that, and that's true, because what's nice is that when we started advertising, we are actually getting a bunch of people really interested in coming in. And the fact that it's already a no-touch workout, so you need to have your marketing plan, how you market it too, right? The fact that it's advertised as no touch, your boxing gloves, your heavy bag is playing a key role, a big role, because people are like, okay, do I go to the gym where I touch everything and I don't know who's touched it before me, or do I go in here where I wear my own gloves, hit the bat, take my gloves off, sit in the car and go home, right? And just some rough numbers, just in the past 3 weeks since we launched our ads, I think all 3 clubs combined, we've received nearly 200 to 220 odd leads just through our Facebook and Instagram advertising. So it's good to see positive steps. Our downward trend of, we were net losing members, and now the curve is going up again. Very good to see. That's kind of where we are as a business. So really high level, I don't know if you wanted me to delve into particular parts, Bob, Tom, how we handled it. I can talk for a while. You tell me where you want to go from here.
We're doing good time-wise. I'd like to sort of maybe get into the questions, and I'll start by, and please, anybody who wants to ask, you can type something in on the chat function and we'll pick that up. It's really great to hear the aspect of the relationships and how it kept you going. And also, I imagine it kind of helped you keep the faith during those dark times because you already had these relationships with your members. What about your employees and your trainers? Did you have any challenges with keeping them and inspiring them and staying in touch with them and that sort of thing?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we definitely face challenges there. So what we did as a business is we decided to keep some of our key staff members compensated during the shutdown. Others were furloughed and went on unemployment. We were able to stay in touch with them, just physical phone calls, Zoom meetings for the training. What is nice is that the passion, like my trainers are real fighters, right? Their passion for the sport doesn't go away. And they, it's very hard. They don't see themselves at a gym. They'd rather be at a title boxing club. So we were able to retain pretty much all our trainer base. We did end up losing some of our desk staff and even a manager. And actually what was interesting is one of our managers, literally family issues, somebody had COVID, and overnight he just called me and said, Ashok, I'm so sorry, but I can't come into work, and what I'm really concerned about, my well-being, plus I don't want to bring anything in there. So fortunately for us, we had already started advertising, looking for people. So we were looking to reinvest in the business and hire more talent, because I knew that we would make a comeback. So that kind of helped us, helped keep us going. And also one of the things is to keep our people motivated, right? Both our members and our trainers. And we were able to do that just with, communications, talking to them about where they are financially, where they are with their family, knowing what their situation is, and completely being open and saying, if you guys need anything, call me, financially or not. And I did have a couple of my staff members reach out, and we were able to help them out with a few things during the shutdown.
Wow, and I'm sure that gets around whether you know it or not. That's terrific. So going into the colder weather now, and maybe we'll get another spike. I sure hope not. But what techniques and practices have you learned during the COVID crisis up till now that you're going to carry forward, assuming it's completely eradicated and gone? What would you continue doing that you started doing during COVID?
We were already a fairly clean facility. We raised it up 10 notches or more, right? From everything being wiped down, cleaned, the bathrooms being cleaned after every class. And I think members are actually appreciating, the extra clean setup from the clean setup. That's going to continue for sure. Safety practices that we're following, I think will need to continue. What is interesting is, we had between 30 and 55 hanging heavy bags between our 3 locations, and went down to half, so 15, 25, and 25. And what's interesting is the more space actually seems to work better. So we might actually continue that just to provide more safety, more room for people, and it actually allows us to launch more training programs with the additional space, which is coming up.
Did you go outside at all, or did you keep everything inside?
So we did online workouts. We had plans to go outside when phase 4 happened, but when we were allowed to open in very limited capacity, we were able to do our online workouts and the limited workouts indoors. So we didn't have to go outdoors.
Mhm.
One thing that will for sure continue to, Bob, is our online workout. So we've actually invested in some technology and we're testing it out, and this will come out very soon. So there'll be some live workouts for our members along with in-person workouts, and that is going to continue also post-pandemic.
That's awesome. I imagine when you're getting a workout there, you do get a relationship going with your trainer, right? I mean, it's more one-on-one than most sort of workouts.
Yes, what's interesting is, not many love their gym days, right? Nobody gets up and says, "Oh, wow, today's gym day. I'm going to go work out." But what's interesting is many people. I mean, I've heard so many people walking into our boxing clubs going, "Oh my God, I missed hitting that bag."
Hmm.
So it's an addiction, and the fact that they're coming in to beat up something that doesn't hit back. It's very hard not to have that.
Mhm.
And it forms that bond. And what's interesting is, pre-pandemic, I remember, walking into, my oldest club. I know some of my first members from 2013 are still there. And walking in from the back door to the front door sometimes would be a 30-minute process because I'd be stopped. I'd get hugs from members, talk about their families and everything. And all of that is so different now. So one of the first things we had to teach our trainers and our staff is actually maintaining a distance, because we were used to proximity. We were used to, it's a workout, plus it's also such a relationship-based thing that we were used to so many things that we couldn't do anymore. So it's definitely been a new normal.
Mhm. Wow. Great presentation, Ashok. We really appreciate it. And we're going to transition now, again, making quite a leap here from boxing to Bell Tire. I want to welcome Vivek Saran, who is the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer of Bell Tire. And if we can do it the same way, Vivek, if you wouldn't mind, just sort of introduce yourself and your company, and we'll just roll into your presentation. Thanks again, Ashok. Good job.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me today. I also want to introduce a colleague of mine, Greg Isler, who's joined us on the video conference as well. He's one of our strategic agency partners and was instrumental in helping coordinate some of the things we're going to chat with you about today. So he'll be jumping in throughout the presentation as well. So let me just share my screen briefly. Hopefully everybody can see that now, and it's not too blurry on everybody's screen. So what I wanted to chat with you a little bit about today was kind of the rapid disruption response and how that affects your CX. And make sure I'm clicked on there. Yep. A little bit about Bell Tire for those of you that may not know. About 125 stores across 12 DMAs, primarily in Illinois, starting in Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. About 2,200 employees. One of the things that you may think about a tire retailer is, what's our job? And we instead of thinking about positioning, we think about in terms of what's our job. And one would say our job is to change tires and to fix cars. And yeah, that's the job, but really it goes a little bit deeper than that. What's the role that we play? We borrow from the philosophy of innovation, which is the idea that customers aren't hiring brands and businesses. I'm sorry, forgive me, I said it wrong. Brands and customers are hiring brands and stores to do a job for them. They want that product to solve something for that. And that's what is our core value. And at Bell Tire, our job is to give our neighbors peace of mind and trust that we're going to get them back on the road fast and affordably. So all of our decision making revolves around trust, peace of mind, and then the benefits of back on the road fast and affordably. One thing that's interesting, Brad obviously would be in the business where they're essential workers. Who would have ever thought that a tire retailer and mechanics would be essential workers? So that was a new thing for us to kind of figure out and understand and adapt to very quickly. But when you think about it, it's important. It's, those frontline workers, those other people that are essential workers need to get from point A to point B. And all of us that were staying at home to get to the grocery store, to get to the drugstore, to get somewhere they needed to be, they needed to have reliable transportation too. And that became part of the mantra that we started to think about is that's our role. They don't want to be out. Our customers don't want to be out any moment longer than they really need to, because they're trying to be compliant for the most part. We do see some of the other audiences that are doing different things that have different beliefs, but our job was to keep them on the road safe, fast, and affordably so they can get from point A to point B and get back home safely. The other part I want to share with you is I think part of what we were somewhat prepared. Anybody who tells you that they were prepared for a pandemic or they had a game plan that predicted it is telling you a bunch of bull. We'd sit around consultants and they would tell us, you got to do this. Like, okay, why are you so confident? This has not happened since 1918. So anybody that tells you there was a rule book, they were just, telling you, justifying their billable rate to you or trying to prove how smart they are. There wasn't any plan. The one thing we did do as an organization is we had established a discipline of having an existing crisis management plan. Now, what was fascinating is when you think of crisis management, you think, all right, there's something horrific that happens at the store, we have to manage that, or there's a press issue that we have to manage. We'd actually talked about it a lot deeper in terms of kind of coordinating all the different core functions or the organization, that no matter what the emergency was, or no matter what the crisis was, what is the communications response? What is the compliance response? What is the operations response? What is the training response? And if it has to do with altering the way that we do business, what is that response as well? And so we would practice that on a annualized basis, but then we were able to apply it, at least the structure and the function of it, when the pandemic hit. Again, we were making it up as everybody else was going. We were trying to figure it out, but at least we had a disciplined process that we were going through. And part of that discipline process really was consolidating the decision making. And that was making sure that we were, getting everybody in the room quickly, having conversations. The leadership group, we would normally meet once a week without failure. And now it became, we have a standing 45-minute Zoom call every single day. We continue that today. We don't need it from a crisis perspective, but we continue to do that because what we learned was that democratic sharing of information and the organic way that we were disseminating it and sharing it and activating was much more efficient than what we were doing. It's almost sad that it took a pandemic for us to realize that was a more efficient and effective use of time and policy making, decision making that worked in our favor. And we extended that to a lot of the different partners that Greg's going to talk about in just a moment as well, to streamline the decision making and making action. The other part, which is, many of us in the call have been around through other different kind of financial crises and issues. This one is unique and different. And the one thing I think we've all learned is if you sit back and wait and not take this as an opportunity, and this is a weird use of the word opportunity. There is no opportunity in the pandemic, and there is no opportunity in the financial collapse. But if you don't look inward and take the opportunity to figure out how you can be better as an organization, what are the things that you could operationally do more effectively and don't use as an opportunity, then you're doomed not to come out of the pandemic or the financial crisis or issue better or at least the same than you were going into it. And that was something that our organization took to heart. It's okay, business is down, we have limitations, but what are we going to do to improve so that when the new normal, whatever that is, I think I'm still waiting for the new normal, comes back, we are prepared to take advantage of what we can to deliver a better product, which really comes down to driving more trust, more peace of mind, and giving people confidence. And I think that's the last thing to build off of what Ashoka was talking about a little bit, and what Brad was talking about as well is, you know, we'd made a conscious decision that you saw a lot of the advertising, a lot of the brands that were essential workers that were still open. And it was all about empathy. And there is a role for empathy, especially when you're trying to figure out with your customers uncharted territory and how to solve this problem. We decided to make a little bit of a difference between empathy. It wasn't about being unempathetic, and it wasn't about being deaf or tone deaf. It was about going back to our core principle. At this time, when we were listening to our customers and doing a lot of conversations virtually and through other means of communicating, we discovered that they didn't want to think that Belle Tire was empathetic with them as much as just give me confidence that you're going to be there when I need you. And so instead of talking about empathy, we demonstrated in all communications across all touch points what we were to do to give you peace of mind, that we're going to be there, and we're going to be there in a way that keeps you safe and keeps our employees safe. And that became the foundation for what we were doing. And then, Greg, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of how we were approaching things?
Yeah, definitely. And I just to I guess spotlight what you just said. You know, we've all been observing this play out as consumers, and so I don't know how many of us, I personally have felt this, are a bit exhausted from the whole in these challenging times types of advertising. And I think that was one very different approach that Belle Tire took, is that's the assumption. I mean, everyone knows what they're going through, everyone's feeling the pain. So it's not that you're not being empathetic, it's the fact that you understand that now the expectations are different, and let's speak to the expectations first before, you know, without having to go through this entire empathy journey every time. So I think Belle Tire and the team did a really nice job of capturing the right tone at the right time and keeping it still pretty crystallized. So my benefit was I was able to live through all of this in real time with this integrated team that Vivek was talking about. I was heading up client services for the digital agency in this group. Was truly impressed with how Belle Tire responded, how quickly they responded, how quickly Vivek was able to rally the troops. And you know, certainly he referenced the fact that this established emergency response foundation helped, but this definitely went beyond that. It was a mindset within that organization, and it was a mindset that helped establish a tone for that integrated team as well. So what I'll tell you is, it's not often, you may have experienced this in your own careers, it's not often that the agencies all get into the same sandbox with the client and play well together. And the only times that works is when the client is very clear about what the expectations are and sets the right tone within that team. You know, we certainly have the benefit of some terrific partners as well, that helps. But Vivek was able to do that very quickly, capture the right mindset for this team on the daily calls that we were making, and made sure that the expectations were set from the beginning that everyone is going to lean in. This isn't about waiting for your turn.
And Greg's being way too kind and giving me way too much credit. I mean, here's the reality. We're an entrepreneurial organization. We don't call ourselves managers. We call ourselves team leaders. I got this strange title called CMO, but I really am lucky to be the leader of the go-to marketing team. And particularly in a crisis, it's about taking off the insignia off the table. It's taking it off your shoulders and putting it down. And it doesn't matter where the idea comes from. It's about what's the best idea, what's really going to work. Let's put away the territorialism, let's put away any natural competitiveness that may take place, and let's move forward. And frankly, that's not my leadership. I think that starts with the ownership of Belle Tire, and that's part of the culture and the DNA that we've had for nearly 100 years. But thank you for the kind words, but I can't take credit for that.
We'll spread the wealth. But yeah, I mean, Vivek's right. The fact that we had to, you know, we basically we erased all of the thinking borders around this, and we made sure that all the activation resources were on alert, because as you know, we talk about in here, I mean, some of these responses were within 24 to 48 hours, which were fractions of the time of what some of this activity would normally take. It was also getting the broader team, and certainly, as Vivek said, this entrepreneurial spirit that's already within Belle Tire helped, because you needed to get comfortable with instinct and iteration because we were moving so fast. It doesn't mean you're walking past data and facts, but a lot of this, because it was happening and changing in real time, you had to look at observations and make an evaluation and decide what to do based on that in a wildly compressed time frame. So as a result, each of our daily calls, the agenda was led by new learning. So we would start by talking about what are we seeing with prospect behavior? What are we seeing with customer behavior? What are we seeing within our employees' activities and in the competitive set and in our own business? How are those business KPIs reflecting the changing demands of this marketplace? And so that became the radar that would then help adjust our agenda for that day. We would literally go through what priority issues then were resulting from those observations. What were the proposed solutions? Literally, we're brainstorming those in real time on the phone as an integrated team. We're then in real time evaluating those proposed solutions, identifying the priorities, establishing an activation plan, and sending those teams off to activate against what we have decided on that call. They then execute in market, we listen and evolve, and then that feeds back into the next day's call. Obviously, you know, you're not hitting the same topics every 24 hours, but you are maybe every 48 to 72 hours. So the pace of all of this was truly amazing, and as tense as it was actually an energizing exercise that we all went through. So you know, it sounds odd, but it was very valuable to experience how all of this came together. Certainly how markets are disrupted and how businesses respond, that isn't necessarily new. The fact that this is pandemic fueled is. But Belle Tire has been through this before, as a number of businesses have been, and they learned a lot of important lessons from the past and how they navigated that downturn, how the business might come back. And so, you know, this has been written up extensively by a lot of consulting firms. This happens to be Bain & Company. A lot of business books have talked about it. But when you have companies that lean in during these down cycles, they're the ones that are most likely to recover faster and also recover during. So this particular Bain graphic shows that, you know, the compound annual growth rate for those lean in companies was actually 17% during the recession, and then 13% after, and then 14% overall. So you start realizing those results very quickly, but it's a very counterintuitive approach when you're seeing a lot of your sales dip and your resources shrink away. That's the time that you need to be leaning in. And when we say leaning in, I think a lot of times, you know, the challenge with legends is sometimes they take on a life of their own, and I think some of the smaller pieces of the observations or critical pieces of those observations start getting a little less clear. And so one thing that you hear a lot is that, oh yeah, when there's a downturn, you need to lean in, and that means you need to go on the offensive, and you need to make sure that you're investing heavily into those markets, and that's how you're going to capitalize. And if you really dig into the research, and if you really dig into the businesses that succeeded, they did both. They had a really aggressive offensive strategy, but they also had a really smart defense. So Belle Tire was no different. I mean, as soon as this started gaining traction within the marketplace, Belle Tire shut down their upper funnel media. Significant investment, significant dollars in play. So that was a defensive maneuver to make sure that you weren't investing in places that weren't going to at least provide a more direct return on the kind of effort that was going to be playing out over the next several months. Meanwhile, however, they took some of those same funds and they repurposed them. So that's where you immediately shift into the offense. So they reinforced that lower funnel activity. They made sure that their presence was still top of mind with their customers and anyone that might have these emerging needs. The creative tone was immediately revised. Vivek is going to take you through some of the representative creative that we've included in this. But you know, as he talked about, it was capturing that expectation of the customer and translating the empathy into expectation versus just focusing on the empathy part. The products and services were revamped again in real time. As we were having these calls, we were identifying areas where the actual service experience needed to change. And so we were identifying that on these calls, and operationally it was getting executed within stores within 24 to 48 hours. It was truly amazing to watch. The media partners that Belle Tire works with started testing an entirely new media mix in the midst of all of this. And then based on that learning, started heavily reinvesting as the states were reopening based on that new media mix, capturing the learning and then optimizing as they went. So this is a lot to try to take on, but if you think about the level of focus that was happening on a daily basis, that was what allowed Belle Tire and this integrated team to respond in this broad way.
I guess before I go there, it's an interesting challenge, because how do you do all of this when everybody's trying to stay home, everybody's trying to stay healthy, and there's so many different dynamics. And so it was about being creative. It's funny. There's this interesting paradox that if you put limitations on something, you can't be creative. And it's funny, I come from the agency world. I've worked in the management consulting side of things, and now I'm on the client side. And the one maxim I've learned that I wish Professor DeWitt they would have taught me in college was that parameters and guardrails are the greatest inspiration of innovation and creativity. And that's something that I think I wish everybody in this call would take to heart and understand that with constraints, when failure is not the option, you're required to be more innovative, more creative, and do more thinking and figure out things outside the box. And I'm lucky enough to have a team that does that. I'm lucky enough to have ownership that is committed and believes in that, and partners like Greg and other organizations that were willing to invest in that and change the way that we do business. Some fun things that we did, how do you get people from all different political perspectives? I'm not even talking customers. I'm talking about our employees to wear a mask. I got a tire tech and a service tech in the back that says, I don't see anybody. Why do I got to wear this blankety blank mask, and I'm not going to do it? To get them to do it. Now you got Indiana, that was all 4 states were we were pretty lucky. Brad, you've got states that are in other places where the difference of opinions were probably a little bit more divergent than we had to experience. But for the most part, all the states were pretty close. There was a few laggards by a month or a couple of weeks. So we had that luxury that was working with us. But just the dynamic, we had people inside the store, just again, our employees, where they were taking this really seriously, and they had created these incredible barricades with tires, chairs, and everything else to maintain 6 feet social distancing, that it looked like we were getting ready for a zombie apocalypse, let alone making a great CX experience for customers to walk in the store. And then the guys are like, yeah, there's nothing going on. Come on, let's shake hands and let's cut a deal right now. And then let's talk about the consumers that had different points of view and different beliefs. And I'm not sure if you noticed this. It's funny when you're in retail, those signs you used to see in the grocery store, and you still see the wayfinding signs or the barriers. In the early days, people were so scared, they almost had it was like a scotoma, a mental scotoma in terms of seeing those things. They were so vision locked of getting tasks done that those barriers were invisible. They were physical barriers. There were signage, but they would be invisible. I don't know how many times I was observing a store and a customer would run right in, nearly push people aside, get right 2 inches away from the person, not wearing a mask, and says, I need tires, I need them now, and I want to get out now. And so people were scared, and we had to manage these dynamics, and our culture is customer satisfaction is the bottom line. So how do you do this in a way that takes care of these needs, complies with the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, keeps our people safe, and takes care of customers and keeps our customers safe? So we had to do things in the store. You'll see down here, I'm not sure if you can see my arrow. We had signage, we had floor graphics. I don't think that one made it here. We had to cut a commercial. How do you cut a commercial in the era of COVID while maintaining social distancing and demonstrate, without saying empathy, demonstrate what we're going to be doing to keep people safe? How do you implement and then manage the change process of getting that through? What's the new experience that you can literally not have to talk to anybody face to face, stay in your vehicle, and get 80% of what we could do at the store done while you stayed in your vehicle safe and sound, including payment. So there was a lot of things that we had to go through, and this just is a sampling of some of the things that we went through to create that better experience for the customers. Because at the end of the day, the reason we had buy-in is about 3 years ago, we made a commitment as an organization to make sure everybody understood our core values and what we're about. And to this day, if you go into any of our stores and you ask people to see their core values card, they'll be able to pull out a card that talks about the job, that talks about our goal, that talks about our core values. And every decision we make, if it doesn't satisfy or live within those core values, then it really isn't something that's worthy of our time and our efforts. And I think the value was going back to that idea of trust and peace of mind. Everything we were doing was about building trust and peace of mind with customers and with employees. The nice part is,
real quick, Vivek, not to slow you down, but do you want to touch a bit on the aggressive offense with regard to the NFL draft?
yeah, that was something that was just, when everybody was paring back and we were paring back too, it was just an opportunity to realize that we could see how things were going to be coming down. We didn't know exactly how they were going to reopen or what was going to happen. And live sports was gone. And you could hear across America how much people were missing live sports. And lo and behold, there was this new thing that we'd seen over the years called the NFL draft that was going to happen. And all of a sudden, it was this moment of epiphany that the pent-up desire for sports was the opportunity to unveil the new way Bell Tire was going to go to business. It was going to be, numbers, and the numbers did bear it out, of high ratings that hadn't been seen since the Super Bowl and since the Oscars so far. And so how could we leverage that to share that new contact-free experience and to demonstrate, rather than to say that we empathize, to demonstrate how we were going to be there for you to keep you safe and keep our employees safe. So that was an example of going on the offense, investing when most of the businesses were still closed, and then really doubling down. That became the linchpin. That was the moment that started a large engagement, investment, and effort that we have not stopped since. And the next slide, which I'd already previewed, was an example of how it can have impact. Pre-COVID, the market share has increased pre-COVID by 11 points in a mature marketplace with very little competitive differentiation. And I just saw the market share numbers recently for the previous rolling 30 days, and they haven't gone back. And I think this is an example. You intuitively know the maxims that they teach in business school and things that we know as kind of common sense business practices. But when you do the things not knowing what a game plan should be to do it, and then you see those fundamentals come true, it's refreshing, it's promising. And again, I'm going to be very honest. We were very fortunate versus some other businesses. We were considered an essential business. However, in the month of March, business was down 10%. In the month of April, we were down 50%, and in the month of May, we were down 20%. And to be able to capture that gain and recover is a testament to the entire team and to some of the fundamentals. And yes, the thing is, all these were all about that customer experience, peace of mind and trust. That was our guiding star. It happened in terms of the way that we trained our associates, the way that we created a new experience in store, new products we were developing, the way we were communicating with them, and the way that we were approaching everything that we did from consumer engagement, strategy and calendarization. When did we talk to them? Why did we talk to them? What did we talk to them about? So I guess in summary, forgive me for rambling on too much. The key lessons were 5: strengthen your market view. I mean, you really got to do that. That's, it's the core principles. Activate an aggressive offense, play smart defense, collapse cross-functional, cross-partner integration, get rid of those barriers. Those barriers have no room when there isn't a pandemic. It's a great reminder when there is a pandemic or a crisis that's unforeseen that they clearly don't have a place there. And then accelerate, double down, do be introspective, figure out how you can be better, what you can do. And then when the market comes back, you're there. I mean, Ashok did that. He could have kept charging people for their service. He could have stopped communicating. He did it. And the fact that 100 customers want to come during the pandemic when he can't really offer services, want to continue their subscription, and now they're coming back faster than people are leaving. That's the idea behind it. Brad talked about it in terms of confidence, letting people know their commitment. These are the things and fundamentals that, everybody goes, yeah, 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 but it takes something like this to go, yeah, wow, that's what you got to do. So sorry, guys. So sorry for rambling. I think I went over my time, Bob.
No problem. That was
And-
fantastic.
Hey, Bob,
Super.
before you jump into
Yeah.
questions, I just want Vivek to know, I do try to teach uncertainty, and I agree with you. That's when innovation happens. Unfortunately, most undergraduate students, they chafe at uncertainty and a lack of structure, which is really sad, because I'm totally with you. You know, when you're given constraints, that's when you get, you know, I love those challenges and the opportunity to get more creative. And as you guys well know, the world's very every day is unpredictable and presents its challenge. And we're putting out, you know, we're solving problems every day. But
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
we
I mean,
try,
it's
we
so
try.
true.
But I guess to a certain extent at the graduate level, you know, MBA, they use case studies and whatnot to help stimulate that.
I think it's the paradox of youth, Professor DeWitt. It's just they think they can conquer the world, right? They haven't heard.
Hey, I always tell people what we have perspective. You know, I don't know about you. The one thing I'm worried about right now is my health and my longevity. But what I do value is all the experience I've had and what I've lived through and the perspective it provides. So I wouldn't trade that for the world. But thanks again. I'm going to flip it back to Bob and turn my microphone off.
So I do have a couple of questions for you, Vivek. And I agree with Tom totally when you were saying the idea of constraints leading to innovation. You know, specifically with respect to the creative process and making advertising and whatnot, but for the whole organization. And we saw that for all three of the presenters today, the same exact sort of, you know, constraints leading to these creative results. And they're also tied to the fundamental values and purpose of the company as well. So my question related to all that is, can you tell us a story, or maybe you don't have one, but I hope you do, about that moment when you said, aha, let's go straight to the competence as opposed to the empathy, and start saying, you know, the empathy is presumed, and so let's show people actually how to inspire to bring the customers into your stores. Was there a moment? Was there a conversation, a meeting, research?
You know, it's funny. I distinctly remember an executive leadership team meeting that was happening early on. One of our huddles. I don't have a beautiful story like Brad does in terms of like those kind of epiphany moments, but all of a sudden we started to look around the room, and there was a chatter. We don't know this. We're dealing with that. This person has this issue. This manager doesn't want to work because he's afraid of his health. But all these things about, you know, do we have a sale? We have a sale scheduled for the end of March. You know, do we have to have a sale? What do we do with the media? How are we going to be able to cancel it? It was all this chatter. And it was a leadership moment when the chief executive officer said, okay, everybody calm down. Everybody calm down. Everybody's looking to us to lead. And then all of a sudden it started becoming an organic conversation. Yeah, you know, our job is to give people trust and peace of mind. You know, it became going back to the core values. And that's when everything kind of settled down. And it was really, okay, you guys focus on this. You guys focus on that. You guys focus on that. We're going to come back within 24 hours. We're going to share information. We'll report. I mean, you know, who would have ever thought that HR would be our intelligence and understanding all the rules of all 4 states and over 600 municipalities, but they were, because they had to deal with every, you know, HR issue in each of those different municipalities. And so everybody had a defined role. And that was, I guess, Bob, that was the defining moment when it was like, we have a core value. It's a core value that extends between our relationship as leaders to our employees. It's a core value that extends to us as a company, to our customers. And if we hold steadfast to that, we'll get through this. We'll make some mistakes. We're not going to be perfect, but we'll get through it. And that's kind of the moment.
Mm-hmm. And a question for you, maybe the other panelists too, is, you know, having to rally under this pressure we can't stay under this pressure forever, hopefully. I mean, it just seems unsustainable in some ways. And everybody's doing Zoom meetings. My question is, if you had a magic wand and you could make it all go back and we could choose the level of Zoom meeting versus in face-to-face, because we've had mostly Zoom now. What's the right mix? Are we discovering something about working from home? What would you say about that in terms of productivity and how people are going to run going forward?
I can really speak from a Bell Tire perspective and what I'm seeing with some of our partners. I do think there's been a fundamental change. I don't know that it'll go back 100% to where it was in terms of coming in the office or the probably the limited use of working from home pre-pandemic. I think we've all figured out how to manage through that, and technology has evolved with us. I do think in our case, what I fear is the level of productivity over time, I think will not be sustainable. It's not because it's sustainable because of commitment, but I think right now the blurring of the lines between work, space, and time with personal life, space, and time has blurred. And I fear our folks are so proud and so invested that it could cause burnout over time. And I'm worried about it. So it's not about a lack of somebody not wanting to do something. It's really more about how we're at that heightened level. The one thing I think led to our success, and it's funny, Professor DeWitt, you probably deal with all these kids a lot better than I do. It's just in terms of like when you're younger, you think the higher you'll advance, the more control you're going to have, and the more you're in charge, the more you can own things and force things to happen. And I don't know what it was, but this realizing I actually have it in my office, which is control the things you can control and focus on the things you can change, right? Neither of which is a pandemic, neither is of which all the things we've had to deal with in the last 90 days. And if you can let go of that and empower your people, you hired them for the reason. And if they're not performing up to expectation, then there's another issue involved. But if you've hired the right people, empower them, give them ownership, and get out of their way. And I think that's why on our side at Bell Tire, that is a maxim that we all follow. And that's why we've been so successful having people perhaps be even more productive at home than they were before the pre-pandemic, because of that sense of responsibility, the sense of that ownership, the sense that they're invested in it. But I mean, Ashok and Brad may have differences in their different categories. So I'll stop talking for a little bit.
Yeah, Brad, Ashok, do you have anything to add on that sort of topic of productivity going forward? And
Brad, go ahead.
So from our industry, very much a remote versus being on site. So we've gone through now for the last 3 months, a full assessment of every role, which components of the role have to be on site to provide excellent care, excellent being defined as safe, high quality, and experience. And then what jobs, tasks can be done remotely, and how can we build then that tech platform to allow that to happen. So basically, people's jobs, it seems like, are evolving. Some will be remote full-time if their job allows for that. And I guess there will be some on-site interactions occasionally. And then some people's role will be full-time on-site if they need to provide care, and others will be blended. That seems to be the path that we're going on right now. And then what comes along with that blending is a significant decrease in the rental footprint that we need for administrative space. So that's already happening in our organization. All of a sudden you have these very large buildings that used to house 100, 200 people who were doing billing, you don't need anymore. So this becomes a cost savings, and you can take that savings and then reallocate it towards clinical care. So so maybe that's another thing about how to turn a lemons into lemonade, decrease non-value added operational costs to the organization. It sounds like Vivek and Greg, you did the same thing. Ashok, you did the same thing. It's those things that we used to spend money on thinking that it was a value. All of a sudden in the pandemic got redefined. So we can then reallocate that funds or those funds to different sources.
Yep.
Brad and Vivek provided the corporate view of things. So I'm a small business owner, service-based industry, right? My perspective, I look at it two ways. I look at it from my customer standpoint and my internal management of my staff. We're a small business, 30 employees overall, right? From a member standpoint, I think the things that are being implemented or will be implementing will not go away, which is the online workouts, the technology when it comes to our app-based things where people can sign up for classes ahead of time, our consults that people actually go in and actually register to even visit the facility for a tour, which is excellent because now we know they're coming in and we're ready for them and we know more about them. I don't think those things are going away. From a employee perspective, I work in an industry where my general manager, my product manager, they're not the most tech savvy people, right? They're in the fitness industry, so this has made everyone realize technology is essential. So a lot of my in-person meetings are now Zoom meetings. So I'm actually getting more time to own and manage than actually drive 45 minutes to Troy for a meeting. So I don't think that's going to change too. But pretty much everything else, the in-person workouts, all of that, they've gone back to where they were with the mandated protocols.
Thank you. Thanks. Vivek, I want to make sure I get this one question in. What types of voice of the customer research have been the most effective to help you continue to evolve and respond?
I'll answer that question, but I actually was hoping you'd ask me what was the biggest mistake we made, because it is a
What was
voice
the biggest mistake that you guys made?
because it is a voice of the consumer mistake. In the spirit of cash is king, right? From a for-profit business, we were looking at the one mistake we made from a defensive perspective is we have a brand tracking study that's in the field continuously, nonstop. We made the decision that in retrospect was probably a mistake, is we turned off that brand tracking study in the month of April. I wish we had kept it on. Not only does it help us define share, but it also helps us understand attributes. We're actually able to use it as a tool to do ask a lot of other questions. And I think that was the one mistake that we made from being probably a little bit too aggressively defensive, that we probably should have left it on. I don't know. It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. I don't know that I would have made that same. I would have probably made that same misdecision knowing what I knew back in the beginning of March, or middle of March, but that was one of the voice of the consumer elements that I probably would not have eliminated had we done that. That said, we were able to use calls to the customer service. We do text analytics on that to understand what the issues are, what the questions and concerns are. We have we're going to be allowing chat online coming up soon, but we have a lot of people that email us on a daily basis, from customer complaints to questions about sales to concerns, everything else. We analyze, respond, and take a look at all that information. I have learned over the years, particularly in retail, if you don't listen to your field, you're blind to what your customers think. Now, you have to be able to filter their interpretation from what the facts are, but that's a different assignment. Our guys are in front of customers every single day. They hear the good, they hear a lot of the bad that gets exaggerated sometimes, and all parts in between. And if we don't have that ongoing dialogue with managers, with associates, with the guys in the back of the shop, with the folks that are dealing with it and their managers, the regional managers, then you're blind to a big piece of it. And what does that mean? That meant that we did with Ashok did, we started doing virtual meetings with them. We started doing virtual community meetings. We actually did focus groups with them virtually. We did focus groups with associates as well as with consumers virtually. Just utilizing technology to continue that listening. But I think that's an example. I want people to understand, you will make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up over it. That's one mistake that we made, was shutting down that tool. But we were able to overcome it with utilizing the technology and other tools that we had out there.
Mhm. Thank you. I think we're going to wrap it up here unless anybody has any burning comments or questions at the end.
Hey, Bob, I just want to thank you for doing such a great job putting this together and moderating it. I'm happy to see our podcasting, all the training we've done, and our podcast has paid off, and your moderation skills. I could see it. And I want to thank our guests for investing in this opportunity, and taking the time to prepare. What a great discussion. And lastly, I want to thank our guests for staying through the whole program. I've been watching the numbers and they didn't waver at all. So obviously you had them entranced and they stuck around. This is a great beginning. I hope it's the first of many more webinars. And I look forward to seeing all of you at the CXM at MSU CXM Best Practices Symposium at the end of October, which you'll be hearing more about. So I'm sure our poor guests, I didn't see anybody eating any food. At least I could turn my camera off and eat a little bit. I bet you guys are hungry. You better go get some lunch.
I had a big breakfast. I was ready.
Good.
Good
Glad to hear.
Well, yeah, he probably burns 10,000 calories a day.
There you go.
Yeah, you're hitting that bag.
Yeah, that's it really, Tom. I mean, you said it all. I just want to thank everybody for attending and thank the presenters again. You guys were awesome. I think there's a real common thread, amazingly, through the three presenters about creativity and the constraints and just that winning approach, really making lemonades out of lemon. And I wish you all the best going forward. So thanks again. And thanks everybody for attending, and
much.
goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.